Hello, church. So good to be with you. I'm excited. You know why? Because for the first time in my life, Florida Gators and FSU Seminoles share the same misery 2 weeks into football season. That we're just going to need to hug it out, guys. Football season for us is essentially over. I'm already looking at Gator basketball schedule. So apart from that, I just find it ironic that Seminoles and Gators have so much in common already. Anyway, we find ourselves in the third week of studying the book of Jude and a longer text today with some interesting and fascinating things in it. So I do hope that you were able to catch the launch of our Fearless Faith series that I started yesterday. We're going to run about 8 weeks of that, just talking about what it looks like to have a fearless faith, something I think we all desire, but is a challenge for us. Okay, let's get to what the book of Jude has for us today. Beginning in verse 5, it says this: though you already know this. So he's repeating something that they know. In fact, let me pause and say that this is probably the first indication of who the audience is. That in all likelihood, based on what's about to follow, these are Jewish Christians, people with a strong knowledge and history of the Old Testament scriptures. So he says, though you already know this, I want to remind you that the Lord at one time delivered his people out of Egypt, but later destroyed those who did not believe. And angels who did not keep their positions of authority, but abandoned their proper dwelling, these he has kept in darkness, bound with everlasting chains for judgment on the great day. In a similar way, Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding towns gave themselves up to sexual immorality and perversion. They serve as an example of those who suffer the punishment of eternal fire. Then in verse 8, in the very same way, on the strength of their dreams, these ungodly people pollute their own bodies, reject authority, and heap abuse on celestial beings. But even the archangel Michael, when he was disputing with the devil about the body of Moses, what? Like what did he just say? When the archangel Michael, when he was disputing the devil about the body of Moses. Okay, before I finish this, we need to talk about that. I mean, where does this come from? Never in the book of Deuteronomy or anywhere do we find that there's a debate over what to do with the body of Moses. So this comes from a book called The Assumption of Moses. It is an apocryphal book. And so an apocryphal book is a book that has doubtful authority, has doubtful authorship, right? So they can't say for certain who wrote it or why they wrote it. So anyway, apparently Jude has this Old Testament apocryphal book called The Assumption of Moses. Okay, so there was this wrestling for Moses. It did not himself dare to condemn him for slander, but said, the Lord rebuke you. Yet these people slander whatever they do and do not understand. And the very things they do understand by instinct, as irrational animals do, will destroy them. Woe to them. Can we just say in verse 11, woe to them? This is a bad thing to have God say to you, is to woe to them. Something is coming that is not good. They have taken the way of Cain. They have rushed for the prophet into Balaam's error. They have been destroyed in Korah's rebellion. So all these Old Testament references. So essentially what we can take from this text is none of us can say we weren't warned. I mean, the author of this text, Jude himself, says to the people, listen, I'm warning you about the way things went in the past and that God's judgment did not skip over these unfaithful people. He's saying, listen, I want you to feel the heat of this warning. And I think the truth is Christianity as we see it today has just grown really, really comfortable with being dismissive to the commands of Jesus and being obedient to living by faith. We just easily dismiss it. We have kind of got a dereliction of duty, if you will. We've been called into the fight, and then we just kind of dereliction of duty, right? So I think the word that Jude has for whoever this group of people is still true for us today, that these warnings, these examples are there. So listen, this is not just some sort of random list he has here. What you need to understand about Christian and Jewish history is they rolled these three examples out all the time. It's like when your grandfather would say to you, hey, let me tell you a story about when I walked uphill both ways to school and all that kind of. They rolled these kind of lessons out all the time. These are not random, right? So what do we have? We have three examples. We have the people of Israel and their lack of faith in the wilderness, and it cost them what? The promised land. Then there are angels who sin and do not get any kind of pardon. They do not get a pass. They sin, and their consequences for angels were significant. And then, of course, we know the story of Sodom and Gomorrah and what happens with that. Nobody is free from Judgment Day, right? So this is essentially what Ollie is saying. There's so much going on in this passage that because we do not understand the history, we'll read past. But here's what you need to take away. Here's a simple takeaway, right? When he says, woe to them, he says, woe to anyone who does not heed the warnings and examples that God has provided in his scriptures through his people of those who are disobedient. Listen, I don't think this should be a fear text for us because we have nothing to fear in Jesus. But I do think that we need to pay attention. We need to be realizing that we live in a world where these warnings are as applicable today as they have been at any other time in history. And so, church, we want to take seriously the fact that God has called us to be a people of grace and obedience, right? And to take away from this that God's judgment day is coming, but we want to find ourselves on the redemption train on our way to a heavenly paradise, free because we have been set free. I hope this is helpful to you, church. There's a lot going on in that text that you might not understand without some context. So I love you. I can't wait to be with you again. And I hope you have an amazing week. And don't forget, pie auction next Sunday. It's going to be a grand time. Love you.